Okay, good morning, everyone, and it is a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm grateful to be here with you in October, getting ready for World Convention. A reminder to get your World Convention tickets if you haven't done so already. I'd also encourage you to check out the live Humans Being More event that is running in December in Atlanta, out in the woods in a cabin. Where we'll get to be together. I've booked my ticket for that as well. We haven't had many live events, well, any actually, since March of last year. That's almost 2 years since we've had a chance of any meaningful nature to get together in the flesh, in person. So we've got the live virtual global convention coming up in October, but I would ask you all to give serious thought to coming along and joining us. There's only a few seats left at the Atlanta event for Humans Being More. So I'd encourage you to check that out as well, because that's set to be absolutely fantastic as well. So I want to talk today about the importance of follow-up, because we, in our last call, I think it was our last call, we pulled out our contact lists. We started setting and making appointments, inviting people to get involved, to participate, to look at something. And those initial conversations, though intimidating at first, perhaps for some, the next step in the process, which is often more intimidating for many, is the follow-up. Many people get nervous about doing that, but why do we feel nervous doing the follow-up? In many instances, it's because this is where concerns might come in. Or where we might get the no's. I want us to be assured that we can, first of all, address this comfortably and confidently. And I want to talk about how we can do it, some things we can do to make it a little easier in planning our effective, meaningful follow-ups. First of all, when is the best time to follow up? I want you to put the answer in the chat. When is the best time to follow up? Put what you think the answer is in the chat, or perhaps give a thumbs up or raise your hand, and I'll unmute you. We'll give you the chance to verbalize your answer. Any thoughts? Okay, Mike DiMuccio is saying within 48 hours. Barbara Richmond is saying within 24 hours after the initial conversation. Carol John is saying between 24 to 48 hours. Ron and Renee is saying a couple of days. Michaela within the first 48 hours. Everyone's bang on the money. It's within the first 48 hours is when effective, meaningful follow-up happens. Why is that the case? Well, typically, if we've done our invitations well and right, we've done it when their energy levels are high. The best time to invite someone to make a commitment is when they're feeling a desire to do something. They're excited by what they've heard. And with that excitement, we give them an invitation. And then, of course, we know energy and excitement wanes over time, especially if they don't keep their commitment. So we want to get in there quick while the energy is high and respond. So here's the next question. If within 48 hours is the best time to follow up, when is the best time to prepare or plan to follow up with your prospect? Put your answer in the chat. When is the best time to prepare or plan with your prospect to follow up? What do you think? It's a slightly different question and a slightly different answer. Mike's okay. Right after your contact. Mike DiMuccio is saying before the first contact. D, at the time of the contact of the conversation, during the initial conversation, when engaging with the prospect, right after speaking with them. Again, you're all saying the same thing. You're all saying the same thing. What is critical here is when we extend the invitation to do something at the same time as we confirm the commitment, we let them know we're going to schedule a follow-up call. Let them know there and then. We want to know your outcome. We want to know how this is going to be for you. And we let them know that the desire to follow up is based on our interest in their experience. And as a result, we plan right there and then to follow up. This takes the pressure off of them when they get that phone call from us. There's no surprise. But also for those of us that are introverts, and those of us that are more supporter types versus the promoter types and the the analyst types, it's a little bit more easy for us as well, because we've already made that arrangement and that agreement. So we can pick up the phone and comfortably say, hey, just as we discussed, just phoning up to see what you thought of this video, or what you thought of that webinar, or what you thought of that blog post. What did you think of this? Or what did you think of that product? And as a consequence of that, it makes it much easier. Now, so we've talked about a couple of things. We follow up within the first 48 hours. We make that arrangement to follow up at the time that the invitation is extended. That is critical, okay? The other critical thing is we want to make sure as we're following up that we're doing it deliberately. I talked before about deliberate practice. What does effective follow-up look like? I want to, again, just share this story because I love this story of Ben Hogan, very famous golfer, recognized perhaps as one of the greatest golfers of the 20th century. And it was suggested that he was the inventor of practice. I find that a fascinating concept. How can someone invent practice? Well, he said, and I'll quote what he said here, he just loved to practice. He couldn't wait to get up in the morning so that he could hit balls. He said, I'd be at the practice tee at the crack of dawn, hit balls for a few hours, then take a break, then get right back to it. For him, every practice, though, had a purpose. He reportedly broke down every process and phase of the golf swing and tested new methods for each segment. Imagine doing that. Every phase of the golf swing, let's break this down, what works well, what doesn't, and let's identify new methods for every section of that process until he crafted what he felt was a near perfect swing. What was the result of that? He had incredible results. It says here during the 1953 Masters, Hogan hit the flagstick on back-to-back holes. And a few days later, he broke the tournament scoring record. That is insane results because he'd crafted his method. So to that end, as we look at crafting our method of follow-up, what would you say are some essential elements of an effective follow-up experience? Put them in the chat. Again, you can see I'm wanting us to have some interaction here. Either put it in the chat or raise your hand using that little button that we have here in Zoom and share your answer, and I'll unmute you. What are some different phases or segments of an effective follow-up? Because the critical thing here is, we've all heard it said, haven't we? The fortune's in the follow-up. But if we're not doing the follow-up effectively, the fortune won't be found. That's the problem, yeah? And my music teacher used to say to me, it's not practice that makes perfect, Ben. It's perfect practice makes perfect. If I'm practicing with bad habits, then those 10,000 hours that we say will turn us into professionals. If those are 10,000 hours misspent developing bad habits, then I will not have the perfect golf swing, so to speak. I will not get the results that I'm seeking. So the key is, if we're going to spend our time in Nikan practicing on purpose, like Ben Hogan, like Hogan talks about here, then we've got to make sure that we do it deliberately, that we analyze, that we self-reflect, that we understand what makes things good, and then we craft it with an anticipation and expectation that my follow-up experience, when I'm reaching out to my customers or to my prospects or to my teammates, is as close to perfect as possible, and it's the best in the business. And I've got this nailed down. And this will help us to really expand our business. So what are some things? We've got some different comments coming in here. Okay, so Mike has said questions, 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 and listening, listening, listening. Yeah, ask great questions and learn to listen. That's really, really important, isn't it? And we could go into that. And each of these, this is the thing, each of these answers that are being given here could be a separate training session in and of themselves, couldn't they? Because just like Ben Hogan, when he goes in and says, let's break down the different segments, you know, of a golf swing, and let's craft it, let's analyze it, let's study it, let's figure it out, and let's look for ways to do it better. Then, you know, that takes a bit of practice and a lot of time, doesn't it? Barbara, Barbara Tucci, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute your line?
Yeah, one of the things I love about follow-up is looking at the ways that I can either like, oh, I think there's a great article you'll like about that. Let me get back with you on that. So you can get back with them on paper or videos or other things. I'm remembering that it's 7 to 10 taps, right? Yeah. 7 to 10 things. So the other thing is, you might like to talk to my friend. She's a nurse and she knows more this and that or whatever. That is setting up for a three-way very casually, but it's a planned, skilled event that's happening. And, or, my good friend has been in the business a lot longer than me or is more familiar with these technologies. Let's see what works best for you. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a nurse or somebody, but someone that they would highly respect and get a three-way. So I wanted to bring that in there because I think sometimes we drop the ball on that and we think we can answer these questions. I still don't answer the questions as best. I always want to have somebody else. I'm the relationship person. I'm the connector. I'm not the one to coach or train or enroll, really. I'm the one to hold the hand and introduce them to all the people. So I just wanted to underline that. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Making connections and personalizing the content. And I'm glad that you referenced that principle of having some type of customized content in the follow-up. There's some study that was done that showed that 78% of customers recognize or interpret personalized content as coming from a company that cares. Yeah, and I think that's really important for us to understand, because especially in our business here in NECAN, we can customize and personalize so much because we're doing it in person. Yeah, the follow-up takes place this way, doesn't it? Versus any other way. So our follow-up is perhaps the most customizable, personalizable approach that you could have in any industry, because it's face-to-face or it's mouth, Zoom to Zoom, person-to-person interaction here, where we can really customize it and get to know them on an individual basis. So yeah, personalizing our content and customizing and facilitating interactions with others, bringing in the ABC element, I think is a great way for effective follow-up as well. So we've got, Mike has said, ask great questions and listen for the answers. Barbara Richmond has also said, don't just ask, what did you think? This is a good point, that, because that, what did you think, is a great door opener for them to shut you down. Yeah. So you gotta, when Mike says ask questions, we've got to learn what are the best questions to ask. Instead ask, what did you like best? And it puts them in a positive frame of mind. I like that. Michaela said, listening to the needs of the prospect, asking questions, and then informing. Yeah, again, listening to the needs. And I would add to this as well, as we're listening, listening doesn't just involve our ears, It involves our eyes. Yeah. We're looking for body language. What are they saying, or what are they not saying? How is their tone of voice? But Paul Gabias posted on Facebook the other day. I hope you don't mind me referencing this, Paul. I know you're on the call today. He talked about, as a blind person, how much information he gets from a handshake, right? And he was talking about how he's missing the handshake right now with all of this isolation that goes on with COVID. And there was so much that he got, the height and weight of a person, the texture of their hands, if he puts his hand on the shoulder, the feel of the fabric of their clothing, the type of clothes that they wear and all that kind of stuff. And he got so much information. He thought, my goodness me, how little I pay attention when I shake someone's hand. That was the first thought that I gave. How little I pay attention when I'm shaking someone's hand. What are we failing to notice when we go through this process of follow-up? Wouldn't it be great if for a moment we could take away a couple of senses and say, rely more heavily on the other senses for just a moment and glean and pick up something different from this experience? What are you learning? What are you watching for? Because in Paul's experience here, just with a handshake, he got so much more from that than what I did. And it made me value all of a sudden and want to go out there and have my next handshake as soon as possible and experience that differently. Yeah. So I think we need to look with a different set of eyes as we follow up. Seek to understand a little differently. Listen to their tone of voice. Don't just listen to what they're saying. Listen to what they're not saying. Listen to the tone of voice. Listen to the pieces of information that they leave out. Listen to the pieces of information that they include. Why did they add that bit? Why did they leave this bit out? Ask yourself questions as you're going through, because what we're striving to do is understand, as has already been noticed, what are their needs and how am I helping to achieve them? Okay, we've got some more answers coming through here. I love what we've got coming out. Drill down to find what their needs are, Barbara Richmond is saying. This is really, really critical. And take that time. I think time is of the essence. It's important that we respond with urgency, but at the same time, that we give them devoted time. So they feel a sense of urgency as we follow up, but when we're with them, we know that we are 100% with them in that moment. Yeah, that those moments of follow-up where we're there with them, we're not thinking of something else. We're not doing one of these terrible habits that we have now of, I'm not sure, do you notice it? I look out for this now on a regular basis. If you go out to a restaurant and you look at other people's dinner tables, do you find that people take out their mobile phones and then rest it next to their knife and fork? Have you seen people do that? And while they're waiting for their meal, they might just kind of flick it over and just have a look at what messages are coming in. They're not 100% there with the person that they're with. Learn to keep your phone in your pocket if you're talking with the person that you're with. Be totally with them. Let them feel that. I think there's something in that where we can let people know, you have my undivided 100% attention. Why? Because you matter. I think that's really important. Barbara Richmond has said, again, be aware of the body language. Body language will say it if they're engaged or losing interest. Again, really, really important. And I think someone else said it, I may have missed it. Practice makes permanent, not necessarily perfect. Mrs. Kramer, you are so right. Practice makes permanent, not necessarily perfect. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? That the more we practice something, the more we create a habit, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that habit is the best. So this is why constant evaluation when we're going through these processes is so very, very important for all of us. So again, my invitation, is a repetition of a previous invitation to practice on purpose, to do this deliberately. Because when we can get together with our investigators, our prospects, our customers, and even our business partners, whenever we're engaging in a business skill, yeah, we should be doing it deliberately with the intent of improvement. Yeah, not just in getting a certain outcome in our business. We've got to kind of have two hats on, if you will, because we're leading our own business. We're the leaders of our own business. And yes, we've got webinars and coaches and mentors. Yes, we've got upline and crossline. But at the end of the day, your ability to improve and grow, along with mine, really falls heavily upon our own personal commitment to grow and improve. It all falls back on us. My success is really up to me. Yeah. Your success is really up to you. It all comes down to that. But I have found that the greatest accelerant to success is a commitment to self-reflection, to self-analysis, and to self-evaluation when we're going through a particular practice or behavior. And I think that will be something that we can really, really work on. I've got a little boy chasing a dog behind me, apologies. If we make that a commitment, boy, we will see things grow fast. So what I'd like you to do, this is my invitation for this week, is any activity that you're involved in this week, I want you ahead of time to make a note. As I go into this activity, maybe as I make my follow-up call, maybe as I extend my invitation, maybe as I show my plan, show the business plan, maybe as I participate in an ABC, whichever of these critical activities it is that I'm participating in, I want you first and foremost to break down and segment a little bit of the golf swing, so to speak. Yeah, break it down and say, okay, let's just look fundamentally, what would make this activity look good? What am I analyzing? Because I need to know if I'm going to measure success, I'm measuring two things. The decision of the person, that to some degree I have control over or influence on, but there's also elements that I don't. Because the truth of the matter is, you could be brilliant at this, but if the person just isn't interested, they're just not interested. Yeah. So you've got to take that into consideration too. So there is the person's decision. That's an outcome. But the other outcome is, how did I perform my part? What did I do that worked well? We need to know how to measure and evaluate success. So to begin with, you need to craft out, what are the different segments of the golf swing? What does it look like? What does success look like here? Or effectiveness or skill or competence look like? Break it down. Do that before you do the activity, before you go in and engage with that behavior. Then coming out of that, make it very quick within that 48-hour period. I always like to do it right afterwards. If I've just done an ABC, if I've just done a presentation, if I've just talked to a prospect, I will always, once I get off my prospect's call, I always sit down and say, okay, how did that go? What worked? I always do that. What worked well? And I go, I forgot to say this. Or yeah, I got that bit right. Or if I just said this. And then I don't beat myself up by saying, okay, I dropped the ball there. I go, okay, now I know for next time to include it. And then my goal for next time is to include it. And then when I do, I evaluate, how did that work? What worked better as a result? Did I see an improved performance or an improved outcome? Yeah. And the more we can have that sense of self-evaluation on what we're doing and give ourselves meaningful, critical feedback on our skills, then, like I said, we can start to really master some fundamental behaviors for our business. One of which is follow-up, which we've talked about today. So as we draw to a conclusion of our call today, we've covered some important points. One, that follow-up, the fortune, yes, is in the follow-up, as we've said. It needs to be timely. We need to plan the follow-up at the time that we extend the invitation. We need to break down what makes an effective follow-up effective, so that when we go in there and we follow up, that we are observing, we're asking great questions, we're listening, we're responding, we're engaging, we're looking for what their needs are so that we can respond accordingly and support them according to the problems that they have and providing the solutions that they need. At the same time, we're also striving to do this on purpose so that we can practice our own skill set and with the intent of improvement, knowing that our success fundamentally is up to us. But if we practice on purpose and we go into each behavior knowing in advance, this skill has these core components to it. And I'm going to practice this, and I'm going to practice this, and I'm going to practice this when I go out there and I meet with my new person. Then, for example, I'm going to listen. I'm going to ask good questions. I'm going to see what their needs are, and I'm going to watch for body language and strive to pick up on maybe what they're not saying as I talk. So these are the things that I'm going to do on purpose as I do my follow-up. Yeah. And then afterwards, immediately afterwards, because our own evaluation is important more quickly. Why versus 48 hours? I believe it's because right after we've done it is when we feel it the sharpest and the keenest. Yeah. And so we can evaluate ourselves really quickly, really well when we've just gone through a behavior or an activity with someone. So come out and then quickly, and it only takes a few minutes. How do I feel? What went well? Use your gut. Yeah. What went well? How did this work for me? What would I do differently? Make some notes and then plan to improve on your next behavior. And I promise you, ladies and gents, as we each do this, as we practice on purpose with each of these critical activities for building our business, we will increase the chances of our success. Why? Because we limit and reduce the element of luck. We don't want to be striving for good luck in order to build our business. We want to be able to know that we're doing this because I'm in the driver's seat and I know what I'm doing. And I'm confident that when I apply my skills and I get in front of people, I get results. Because I practice, I know what's involved in the critical steps. I have interrogated those critical steps. I know them inside and out. I know every element of that process. And as a consequence, I know where it's at and I know how to be a master of it. It's interesting. I think I've told you a number of times for a family services organization a number of years ago, a charitable organization that is actually with my church that I belong to. One of the responsibilities that I was given as a volunteer, I was volunteered on their behalf. Will you please help us out? We have an addiction recovery program. Will you oversee it, right? And run this for our local community. It was for addictions in general. And there was this on one occasion, and I ended up doing this for about 4 years. Absolutely loved it. That to me was personal development in its rawest, most brutal form I've ever witnessed in my life. Absolutely incredible to be a part of that experience. On one particular occasion, one person was saying just how hard a time he was having. And another person in the group reached out, empathized, and said, "Don't worry, I know where you're at." And this chokes me up. He says, I know where you're at. And he says, I know, not because I've walked the path, but because I've dragged myself along it with bloodied knuckles and broken nails. And I know every texture of every stone in the road. Yeah, I know it. I know where you're at, and I know what you're experiencing. My goodness me. That is self-evaluation, isn't it? Yeah. Guys, if we want to have great success in our business, I'm not asking for passive observation of what we're doing. to see if I can maybe make a mild improvement and expect a radical transformation of my business. That is not what we can expect. If I want a radical transformation, if I want this to be incredible in what it offers me in return, then it may demand of us to drag ourselves along the path for a season, not forever, but for a season, and get bloodied knuckles, get cracked nails a little bit, and be so close to the footpath that we're treading that we can observe and be familiar with every crack in the road, because we are doing all we can to change and grow and transform. And with that commitment, with that devotion, with that striving for self-analysis, self-awareness, and personal change, we will get the results that we seek. But doing it casually is not enough. So I want to emphasize that when we talk about the practice on purpose, when we talk about understanding what makes up a certain activity or skill to make it effective, that we don't go into this with some glib approach of saying, I'll try a little harder, I'll be a little more attentive, because a little harder and a little more is not enough. Not if you want to be great, not if we want to be excellent, not if we want to get the best results possible. That's not what it takes. Not here and not anywhere. So if you truly want a transformational experience in your business, in your skill set, in life, then be willing to drag yourself along the road a little bit. Be willing to do that, and know that there will be others when you do that will be there with you in Nikan saying, I know where you're at. I've been there before. I recognize this stone in the road. But you can get up, you can move past this, and you can do better. You've got this. Because making that change is hard. It's not easy. Yeah? Because in order to really craft and perfect, it means we fail and we trip up and we fall a ton of times. But if we're willing to do that, because our desire to pick ourselves up and win is stronger, then win we will. Yeah, and the taste of victory is far greater, and it swallows up every bitter taste of failure that we experience. So go after it with everything you've got, because the reward is so much the greater than just being casual or passive or average in this journey. Yeah. And as Mike says here, yeah, see you on the road less traveled. I love that. So thank you all very much for being with us today. Excuse my raw bit of emotion at the end, but gosh, we've got a lot to live for and a lot to appreciate. So let's make the most of it. Thank you all. I love you a lot. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you very much.